Welcome to this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on stratification and differentiation, focusing on feminist views of stratification. Feminist views of stratification largely centre on the idea that women in society are disadvantaged in comparison to men, although the different branches of feminism often disagree on the extent to which this is true, as well as the methods required to change this situation. When examining feminist views of stratification, there are different viewpoints to consider, and these are listed on the screen. Liberal feminism suggests that there is a march of progress towards gender equality, and that equality can be achieved through existing legal mechanisms and through existing social institutions. While society remains unequal, liberal feminists do not advocate radical reform. Radical feminists, on the other hand, suggest that patriarchal control of women is so ingrained into society that radical means are needed to address these inequalities. Marxist, sometimes referred to as socialist feminism, suggests that women are not only exploited by their gender, but also by their relationship to the means of production. Women serve both males and capitalism, and they advocate more radical reform of both patriarchal and capitalist systems. Other branches of feminism, such as black and intersectional feminism, have developed in the late and postmodern era, often in response to the failing of other forms of feminism to address the structural inequalities that women of colour, disabled women, working class women, and the LGBTQ community face in society. While postmodern feminism addresses the challenges of gender in the late 20th and 21st century. In this video, we're going to provide a brief overview of these perspectives. Liberal feminism is often equated with the women's rights movement of the 1960s, what was often referred to as Second Wave Feminism, and this evolved from the dissatisfaction of women in the period following World War II, where women were limited by the constrictions of being perceived as wives and mothers alone. Liberal feminism focuses on legal change, utilising existing structures to provide women with more freedom and choice in how they choose to live their lives. Changes in social attitudes of women to work, family, and education have led to increased independence of women from men, particularly financially. Liberal feminists have championed greater control over reproductive rights, access to divorce, and employment legislation that was seen to hold women back. One of the more prominent liberal feminists, Oakley, argues that women's greater control over their reproductive rights has changed the division of labour in society and left women with greater freedom to work, become educated, and have greater financial independence. This has improved their position in society. However, critics argue that liberal feminism is often concerned with the rights of middle-class feminists and ignores social class, ethnicity, and global inequalities in women's experience. Radical feminists suggest that despite these changes, that gender inequality remains ingrained into patriarchal society. They advocate for more radical means in order to instill a sense of gender equality, suggesting that the power imbalances between males and females are unable to be overcome through a largely patriarchal network of legal systems and social expectations. Shulamith Firestone argued that the root of women's oppression is biology. Women's reliance upon others during periods of childbirth, menstruation, and menopause leaves them vulnerable to exploitation from men. Systems of work, education, and religion are designed around the needs of men and so do not account for the biological needs of women. Furthermore, Susan Brown-Miller argues that women's position in society is often seen as subordinate because of the physical advantages that males have, arguing that males are able to use physical force to control and intimidate women, particularly in the home and the workplace. Another radical feminist is Kate Millett, who argues that one of the key components of radical feminism is sexual politics. She argued that there were unequal power relationships between men and women in society, and that discussion of the experiences of women in this power struggle was key to understanding and developing strategies to deal with women's shared oppression. Radical feminists see the stratification of society as being organised to benefit males, with women in subordinate positions, and if this is to be challenged, then radical action is required. Marxist or socialist feminism suggests that there exists a dual oppression of women, both by capitalism and by patriarchal control, and often these work hand in hand in order to oppress women. Women are controlled through capitalism as their labour is often expected to be unpaid, for example, domestic work, emotional labour, and childcare. When women do engage in paid labour, it is often for lower wages than men and in jobs that have more insecurity. Women are more likely to be employed as a reserve army of labour, according to Marxist feminists, taking on precarious and insecure employment that is increased in times of economic growth but reduced in times of economic hardship. And this can be seen by the large number of women placed on furlough and made redundant during the COVID pandemic. A further limitation to women's employment and thus status in society is the assumption that women are reliant upon the wages of men, according to Beachley, which leads to unequal power relationships in the home. Furthermore, Ansley argues that women absorb the anger and frustrations of male workers, and do so because it is their expected role, although Ansley does explain this more eloquently. Black feminism evolved from the neglect that women of colour faced from earlier waves of feminism. Largely based upon the needs of white women, particularly those from the middle classes, second wave feminism failed to tackle the different experiences of women across society. Mirza argues that second wave feminism largely ignored the different intersections of women's experiences, focusing on the issues of the white middle class. Women are exploited not only by gender, but by their ethnicity, their class, and other social characteristics such as sexuality, age, and geographical location. The legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw famously coined the phrase intersectionality when analysing the experience of black women in the US legal system, describing how women of colour were treated neither based on their gender or their ethnicity, but in a different way altogether. Black and intersectional feminism has led many to suggest that in order to effect change, feminism should be centred on the experiences of the most marginalised, as suggested by author and activist Bell Hooks, who promoted a more unified view of feminist experiences, suggesting that feminism was for all people. Finally, postmodern feminism. This views gender as an outdated concept that stereotypes individuals based upon the categories of male and female. Judith Butler suggested that this was not the case and that men and women cannot be seen as homogenous groups, as the experiences of individuals will differ based upon their own experiences, personalities, preferences, and tastes. For Lorber, postmodern feminism is a theory of gender rebellion. Rather than challenging existing stereotypes, it looks to address the individual's experiences of postmodern society. Postmodern feminists, in line with other postmodern views, see structural divisions in society as being outdated concepts and reject ideas of classifying individuals by class, gender, or ethnicity. Furthermore, postmodern feminism moves away from what is seen as gender essentialism, the binary descriptions of gender, and onto a wider spectrum of experiences, which has brought about challenges from other feminist ideologies. One of the most thorough evaluations of feminist ideas, particularly in contemporary society, is Walby's triple systems theory, which argues that gender, ethnicity, and class all impact upon an individual's social status. And we'll look at this in further detail in another video in this series. But it promotes a more inclusive version of feminism in response to earlier criticisms that feminism is for white middle class women. Others have criticised Marxist and socialist feminism for concentrating too much on the role of women in the economy and less upon the social exclusion that some women face in society. And finally, there are theoretical debates over the source of women's oppression. While some radical feminists, such as Firestone, argue it is a case of biology, others suggest that the gender scripts, as well as other intersections such as class and ethnicity, suggest that the source of this oppression is sociological, and this has implications in debates over the extent to which individuals can define their own gender identity, pitting different feminist views against each other. That concludes this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on stratification and differentiation. looking at feminist views of stratification. Thanks for watching.